Hi everyone, today I'm going to be profiling an Artifact Lair of Darkness deck. I really like the Artifact cards. I've been trying lots of different ways of trying to make them work, including things like Numeron and other Link 2 turbo cards, such as like Cyber's Gadget into Link, Disciple and Devotee, and things like that, trying to turbo out Dagda. But this is the variant that I'm going to be trialing at my locals this week. So it's artifacts with Lair of Darkness, and I'll kind of explain it as we go. Starting off with our main deck, I'm playing 2 Artifact Moral Tech, playing 2 Artifact Beagle Tech. Now, Moral Tech, when it's summoned during your opponent's turn, it will pop a face-up card my opponent controls. Beagle Attack when it's summoned during an opponent's turn, so obviously all the artifacts have an effect when they're summoned during the opponent's turn, but Beagle Attack destroys up to 2 set cards I control, which obviously you're trying to destroy the artifacts and summon them back. Playing 2 Artifact Scythe. Obviously this locks your opponent out of the extra deck when it's summoned during your opponent's turn. 2 Artifact Lancia, which everyone should pretty much know what that does. And I'm playing 1 Artifact Mjolnir. If you don't know what this does, this was in Extreme Force. Pretty sure that was the set name. But it, when it's just summoned during your opponent's turn, it will Monster Reborn an artifact, but then lock you into your artifacts after it's done that. So that's the artifact monster lineup I'm running. So obviously these all can be set to the field if you need them to. So these are also, they're kind of traps, but they're not really, because you can't just activate them when you need them to. You need to have other cards to blow them up during your opponent's turn. So yes, they are trap cards essentially, but they need a little bit more work to make them work. So then I'm going to go into the Lair of Darkness engine. I've chosen this just because it is a control engine that we can use. It also kind of helps you with going second, because the artifacts going second are incredibly slow. You need to wait until your opponent's second turn before really they can do anything. So you kind of need something going second to help. So I'm playing 1 Darkest Diabolus, just to search off Arima if we have to normal summon it. 3 Lilith. Lilith's great because it just gets you more trap cards, Heavy Storm Duster and Sanctum being pretty much the main ones. And 3 Arima. So between the Arimas and the Liliths, you can normal summon either of them. The Arima, if Lair of Darkness is already in the field, can be helpful to get Diabolos out if you need it. It's just an extra beater from there. For the spells, playing 3 Artifact Ignition. So Artifact Ignition is just spell trap removal, targets a spell trap on the field, destroys it, and then if you have an artifact in your deck, you can set 1 artifact monster from your deck to the spell trap zone. It's really cool if you have other artifacts and you happen to have set something like Beagle Tech, because Ignition can pop Beagle Tech, Ignition will set 1, and then Beagle Tech will summon back and pop whatever you set. And if you've got another artifact, it's really good, because obviously Beagle Tech can target up to 2. So that's a really good way of getting a bunch of monsters on the board, plus all of their effects that come with it, because you can essentially pop 3 artifacts and have 3 artifacts on field, maybe Scythe, maybe whatever else you have. So that's really nice. Lair of Darkness, it's fairly self-explanatory what it does. Lair of Darkness gives us access to something like Super Poly, so going second, we have other options, which is nice. And for draw power, obviously we can play something like Pot of Extravagance, because we don't really need the extra deck all that much, other than Dagda, which is the key piece in the deck. Dagda is the most important monster that we're trying to utilize. So for the traps, not too many considering it's a control deck, but we're playing 3 Sanctum. Sanctum's really good. Obviously it summons an artifact from the deck, which is fantastic to summon something like a Scythe on our opponent's turn, lock them out of the extra deck. Trap Trick gives us more copies of Sanctum. Imperm, so Imperm alongside Lancia make up our hand traps. Lancia is really nice because at my locals in particular, it puts in a lot of work against a lot of different decks, but also it worked in theme with the deck, and there's times where you might want to set Lancia, maybe off a Dagda, for example, because Lancia contributes itself off field, which is nice. And then the last 4 cards, I believe it's a 41 card deck, are 2 Heavy Storm Duster, so this is just a searchable spell trap. It's searchable obviously through Trap Trick, Lilith, to target 2 spell traps on the field and destroy them. And then I'm playing 2 back to the front, and back to the front is useful because you can revive artifacts on your opponent's turn. So if you've used a scythe already, you can lock them out a second time by using back to the front, or you can use a very common play would be to normal summon Lilith, tribute Lilith to set a trap, like back to the front, and then bring Lilith back and tribute something in your opponent's turn as well if you can get access to Lair of Darkness. So that's nice as well. That's 41 cards. The other really nice interaction between Lair and the artifacts is that Lair of Darkness obviously activates every end phase, regardless of whether monsters have been tributed, which means if you haven't already triggered Dagda, Lair of Darkness will trigger it for you, which is pretty cool. The extra deck that I'm currently playing, obviously it's set for something like Extravagance, so there's a few multiples, but I'm playing 2 Durendal. Durendal is really important. It's in theme artifact monster, which is cool, but also it can redirect monster effects or spells and traps to blow up spells and traps your opponent controls, which is really nice. Now, it doesn't get its full value because often you will have Lair of Darkness on the field, but if you only have artifacts, Durendal is pretty good. The other rank 5 I'm playing is Volcasaurus, just as some more removal if needed. Then for links, 3 Dagda, this is pretty much the main one you need. I was considering a build with, like I mentioned, Cybus Gadget, but you can also do things with like Scrap Raptor into Hulk and Dagda, but it's very, like, it still dies to the same hand traps that a combo deck would die to. And I don't want to really be losing to hand traps in this control deck, so I haven't gone with that option this time around. I will keep testing and see how it goes, but we're making Dagda on our second turn. Ideally, you'd want to make it on your first turn, but we're just going to trial this and see how it goes. But Dagda is fantastic if you don't know what it does. When the effect of another card on the field is activated, and that card has to already be on the field, so you can't just activate a spell, a normal spell from your hand and trigger Dagda. It already has to be on the field. So a continuous card will do it, something like a field spell will activate it, a monster effect, anything like that. If your opponent activates something, Dagda will respond as well, which is great, and it sets an artifact from the hand or deck to the spell trap zone, and it will be destroyed during your opponent's next end phase, regardless of whether Dagda's on the field or not. So that's really nice. You can just generate, you can often, if you can get Dagda on the field during your turn and activate it during your own turn, then you can often pop 2 in your opponent's end phase. Now, you might think, obviously, that doesn't give you access to Scythe because your opponent will have done all of the things, but it wouldn't be uncommon to set something like a Mjolnir as a revival and a Moral Attack to pop something, which is pretty cool. I'm playing Unchained Abomination as a link 4 just because I'm generating tokens with Lair of Darkness, so I wanted something that was fairly generic. I wanted a 2+ monster that didn't need effect monsters. That was a big monster that I could summon. So I'm playing 1 Abomination. It's probably not going to come up, but it does have some neat effects that destroy things if needed, and I'm trying to destroy my cards in my opponent's turn, which in theory, Abomination can come up to do things if needed. I'm playing 1 Beat Cop, and I only own 1, which is funny, but it obviously has an effect that tributes, which is nice, so I can use that if need be also. And I'm playing 2 Link Spider because the tokens can be, so 1 token can be turned into Link Spider, which can then help you get into Dagda, because Dagda needs 2 different named monsters, but they can be anything otherwise, they can be tokens. And the rest of my extra deck is just some super poly targets. I'm playing 3 Starving Venom because we're hoping to have Lair of Darkness up on the field, so Starving Venom is the one that's going to come up the most. And then I'm just playing 1 Mud Dragon of the Swamp and 1 Earth Golem ad Ignista for Cyburst matchups, which come up at my locals, so that's why I'm playing that. But otherwise you could play kind of whatever tech choice. I mean, you don't have to play these 2 if you don't want to. You could play a second Beacop and a second Abomination if you really wanted to in those spots. So that is the extra deck. And then the side deck that I'm taking, 2 locals. Now obviously this is tuned more specifically for my locals. I'm playing Nibiru, and I'm trying out D-Shifter in the side deck. In theory, it should work fairly well because I'm not going to main deck this and use it going first, but for when I know I'm going to go second, on my turn, after my opponent's turn, I'd typically be setting a bunch of cards and not using the graveyard, so D-Shifter in theory comes up. And if you can play D-Shifter, you should play D-Shifter because it's just insane, and in my locals it would definitely be insane. So I'm definitely going to try out D-Shifter and see how it goes. In theory, it should work. I'm playing the third Lancia as another side card because it is a hand trap, but it's also in theme, so the third one's there. Panker drops, and then some of the cards here are just for some control. Hey, obviously I've already got the Ignitions plus Heavy Storm Duster, so I've got plenty of spell trap removal already in the main deck, but Harpy's Feather Duster and evenly matched going second against control is pretty good. And then just for going first, I've got 2 anti-spell and 1 Imperial Order as my going first side options. But that's the deck that I'll be taking. I'm not going to really do any test hands because this hand just sets 5, this deck sets 5, but I will do a couple of just draw 5s and just to show you the consistency and see how it goes. Alright, so just going to shuffle up, just draw 5. I'm not really going to play anything out. There's nothing to play out, but what I'm looking for pretty much first thing is access to Scythe. That's really important. So between Sanctum, Trap Trick and Lilith, we should be able to see Scythe. And then we're just looking for other ways of getting other disruptions, just to see how many kind of disruptions we can get on our opponent's turn. So Ignition, Arima, Trap Trick, Lancia, and Lair of Darkness. So this is really cool. What this would be, Trap Trick obviously gets us to Sanctum, which is nice. In this hand, we'd potentially even consider setting the Lancia, because if need be, we can Ignition pop the Lancia. Now, I like sometimes doing this. Now, it obviously means the Lancia would become a known resource, but it can still tribute itself off the field, which is nice. Also, Lancia is not relevant to tribute unless you've already got access to Diabolos, but Lancia can also trigger Diabolos in the graveyard, which is just a fun interaction we can do. But with this, what we could just do is activate Lair, normal Arima. We can just tribute the Arima for its effect to draw 1 card and see what we draw. Super Poly, okay, that's pretty nice. So then with this, we probably hold the... we're definitely going to set the Trap Trick because that's going to be Scythe, and Scythe is really nice. And from here, we probably don't even need to use the Ignition. We probably just even set the Super Poly. The Ignition could be our discard fodder for the Super Poly. So this is really nice. We've obviously got, with this hand, Super Poly as an interaction to get rid of 2 monsters. We're getting a token on the end phase because of Lair of Darkness. So we get a token in the end phase. And we have access to Scythe, so that's pretty nice. And obviously Lancia, which is good too. So a few disruptions there for our opponent. Alright, let's see what we get for number 2. Okay, so this is not as fantastic. This does not give us access to Scythe. We can get to the Scythe, but we can't actually, we've got no way of popping it on our opponent's turn. But what we could do is obviously we can set these. In this kind of hand, I mean, the Super Poly, we don't know if that's going to come up. We could probably just hold it and wait and then set these as well. So we've got Imperm, Ignition, pop Moral Attack, which is nice. It would come back and pop a card. If they clear it, Ignition will also, we'd be using Ignition to set the Scythe. Potentially, I mean, it doesn't need to be Scythe in this instance because our opponent's already had a turn, so Scythe might not be the best one, but just hypothetically we can get Scythe. And then if Moral Attack was cleared, we could back to the front, bring it back for another pop. So that hand was not as good, still has plays, but by no means is this going to be a meta deck. So as long as we have a couple of disruptions, that's okay. It is just for locals after all. Alright, another one. Okay, so this is really interesting. Pretty much we've got 2 great trap cards here in Heavy Storm and Sanctum. So with Lilith, we can normal summon, tribute it. I mean, grabbing back to the front here really isn't that good. We could grab Imperm. We don't need Sanctum. We probably do just go 2 back to the front and a Trap Trick and then obviously one of these would get randomly set. And we get a back to the front. So that would be set. Now we can obviously set these as well. Or we can, again, we don't know, because we don't have access to Lair of Darkness, we don't know if the Super Poly is going to be worth it, so we could probably just set the Mjolnir as well. Interruptions wise, we've got Scythe, which is great. We can back to the front Lilith and go for another trap card in our opponent's turn, which is not the worst. Probably go for another Sanctum in that case, so we've got a play for the next turn. We'll do 2 more, because 5's a nice number, and we'll call it there. Alright, we've got Ignition, Duster, Eagle Attack, Lair of Darkness, and Sanctum. So we have a lot of access to artifact monsters here, but what we can do with this, we probably don't even need to activate the Lair of Darkness here. It's not really going to do anything too significant. Doesn't really stop too much on its own. It's not really that good of a floodgate, but we can probably just hold that and set the rest. We can Ignition for Beagletech. Beagletech can set something like Scythe. Then the Beagletech would resolve, summoning itself out, popping the Scythe. Scythe would activate, come out, and extra deck lock, and then we still have Sanctum Duster, Heavy Storm in hand, Lair of Darkness in hand. We can Sanctum out for another disruption depending on the deck. Here we obviously we've got access to Lancia as an option, but we can also use Moral Attack here as well, which is nice. So depending on what the matchup is that it calls for, we could summon either of the artifacts. And then going into our next turn is when we can start generating advantage. It's a fairly slow deck, yes, but I find the artifacts really fun, so that's why we're going to give it a go and see how we go. Bag Attack, Scythe, Imperm, Sanctum. If this card's an Ignition, we're going to feel really... Oh, it is. That feels really good. So this is really nice. This gives us a lot of options. We're going to get maximum value. This is the combo as such. So we can obviously set these. Probably just set all of them just because we can. Who's main decking Lightning Storm? Here we obviously can go Ignition, pop Beagletech. Now again, to play around something like a Gamma, you'd wait until they commit to a monster. So if they normal summon a monster, Ignition, now pop Beagletech. Ignition would resolve first. And again, depending on what the monster is, that would telegraph generally what the deck is that we're facing. We would make the decision there. If it's something that Lancia is going to benefit from, then we go Lancia. But I also like just that the Moral Attack provides a body. So summon the Moral Attack, and then Ignition's done. Beagle Attack then activates next, summoning itself, popping 2. And then we've now got 3 monsters on field, which feels really good. We've still got Sanctum and Impermanence backing up that as well. They're extra deck locked. We popped their normal summon. We can still Sanctum out the Lancia should we need it. But we could also wait. If they clear something, we can Sanctum out Mjolnir and revive whatever it is that we've cleared. We've got an Imperm as well. That's a pretty good hand there, just using the artifacts, not using the Lair of Darkness cards, which is really nice because we're playing with the artifacts, which is the point. But otherwise, that's the deck that I will be playing at locals this Wednesday, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. Thanks for watching.